All right, another Betsy Devos interview. This one is a little bit more interesting in some ways. This one's actually some kind of a Senate hearing, Congress something. It's been covered on C-SPAN. Has to do with discipline in the schools. And as you know, a lot of these Marxist, fascist, racist people, whatever, they look at statistics and they say if people of this race or this sex are, the line isn't flat on the statistics chart, there's obviously some kind of discrimination. And then basically in order to fix that, what you end up having to do is you have to discriminate because, everything's not always going to be flat. Now, you can use such abnormalities if in race or sex or whatever to investigate some discrimination or something, but you should never presume that it exists because there can be all kinds of factors that lead to that. And it doesn't mean that inherently one sex or race is doomed to a particular fate, but there can be very strong trends within any of those attributes that are manifested in statistics. And there can be all kinds of causes that tie into that. But let's watch the video. Here we go.
I want to go back to the school safety report. Within one section of that school safety report, your commission did recommend, we've discussed it earlier, rescinding the 2014 guidance entitled Rethink School Discipline Guidance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you, as Secretary of Education, you went ahead and rescinded that in January of 2019. Is that correct?
That timing might be about right. It might be a little bit.
But you did rescind it in your official capacity. Is that right?
Yes.
And your words, the guidance was, quote, well-meaning to address the fact that black boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended and black girls are 6 times as likely to be suspended.
You can see where this is going.
But the report goes on to say, although well-meaning, you believe, the commission believes, headed by you, that the guidance resulted in teachers and schools not really carrying out discipline because they were afraid of federal action.
Ding, 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 ding.
Is that correct?
That has been, yes, that has been actually spoken to me from a number of teachers.
Okay. And then you went on to lay out in the report.
And by the way, so many of these government schools are like prisons and anarchy, Lord of the Flies. I mean, it's just insane how they cannot enforce conduct. I think the private schools can. I mean, they can just, it's much more easier to kick you out.
That although not specifically called for in the guidance, that there was a concern that the commission had that this...
By the way, aren't these the people that are worried about bullying and whatnot? I imagine if you allow that kind of bad behavior, bullying is just going to run rampant. The same kind of bad behavior and bad character is going to engage in that.
This guidance was creating quotas or certainly pressure to have quotas, meaning that you would look and have to discipline white students at the same rates you were disciplining black students, however unfairly. Is that what you mean by?
This is on C-SPAN in March 2019. And by the way, the caption for the video says that Betsy Devos was citing racist right-wing research to justify her budget proposals on disciplinary guidelines for minority youth in schools.
Quotas that you would actually look and discipline white students to make sure it was equal with the discipline of black students?
Well, Congresswoman, if what you're asking is about whether students
Simple yes or no, please.
Can or should be treated differently,
I'm
for the
asking
same
that
infraction.
that is what you wrote in your report, that this
Betsy is smiling profusely.
was a concern that schools would feel pressure to have discipline quotas. That was in your report, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Every student is an individual and
Yep,
needs to be
but
treated
I'm
as
just asking,
such.
quotas was a concern. Is that correct?
Yes. Say yes.
Well, that has been
It is-
suggested
it
by
is-
the discipline guidance.
Right,
yes.
and you put it in your report, that was a concern. You also questioned the legal validity of the guidance on a theory of disparate impact. And here's where my questions for you come in. At the base of all of
Betsy, by the way, said everyone's an individual. In other words, we can't say, well, we've already disciplined X number of people this race, therefore we're all out of the slots to discipline that. So we can't discipline this person because we did too much already. So, in other words, Betsy's opposing racism.
this, you wrote in your report, the racial gap in suspensions, you cite a study and say, quote, the racial gap in suspensions was completely accounted for by a measure of the prior problem behavior of the student.
In other words, the amount of discipline was caused by the amount of misbehavior. Apparently it was investigated. They're just wondering, were they treating people differently? Were they only disciplining certain people based on some discrimination, or was it actually tied to behavior? How you investigate that, I'm not exactly sure. But anyway.
Finding never before reported in literature. Quote from your report, this research undermines the core proposition in disparate impact theory that statistical disparities necessarily demonstrate that classroom teachers and administrators are motivated by race when disciplining students.
Okay, so in other words, the fact that if you just tally up the people that are disciplined, and there's more of a certain race that are disciplined, that in of itself does not prove it. You might want to do investigation. Apparently there was some research. I don't know if that research was valid or not, but unsurprisingly, it's possible that it could be. And they found that it was tied to the amount of misbehavior, and we have to treat everyone as individuals. We can't just be like, oh no, I punished people of this race or that, therefore we can't do anymore. Otherwise, because that's giving special treatment and exemptions, and that's just going to ruin it for the rest of the students. And this congressperson's not going into the validity of the investigation or any of the details of that, but seems to be questioning the very idea that such a thing could even be true.
A quote from your report. So I looked at the underlying research.
Well, maybe she did. All right, let's see.
And here's what it shows. It says, and I am quoting from the report, prior problem behavior accounts for the racial gap in school suspensions that you cite in your School Safety Commission report.
Yep.
This report says, studies suggest that school disciplinary rates may reflect the problematic behaviors of Black youth, problem behaviors that are imported into schools and into classrooms. They go on to say, difference in rates of suspensions between racial groups appear to be a function of differences in problem behaviors.
Okay. Yeah.
That emerge early in life, remain relatively stable over time, and then materialize in the classroom. And this report that you've cited and based as your theory,
I don't know if they had to go into that early in life stuff, but maybe they're just trying to say, look, it's not something like they're well behaved at home, and then suddenly they get into the classroom and they're, I don't know, maybe mistreated, and they suddenly start misbehaving.
Concludes by saying the association between school suspensions and Blacks and whites reflects long-standing behavioral differences between youth.
Okay. Yeah, that I understand.
That's the research that you have cited in your report in concluding that apparently that it is not
Here she's about to blow up.
racial discrimination and discipline.
No.
But there are some characteristics of Black children that from this report start very early in life, well before they get to the classroom. And in fact, the author of this report has many other writings where he says it's a liberal fantasy that poverty and racism play into high rates of incarceration and criminal behavior. So my question for you is, when you talk about children shall be treated individually, what are you saying?
She's saying that we will not give any special privileges based on race.
Are you saying here, when you quote this research, that the problem really is that black children are just more of a discipline problem?
Not inherently, not metaphysically, not biologically, not genetically. She didn't say any of those things. Maybe that's what you're thinking because you're racist.
Because that's the research you've quoted in your report.
And how exactly are you interpreting it? Because I'm sure you're a racist, because you are a leftist, you are a Marxist.
Well, Congresswoman, I've said it before and I'll say it again. No student, no child should be treated or disciplined differently based on their skin color, their race,
and I think
or their national origin.
Your report agrees with that. They just say that by the very basis of being a black child, you are more likely to be a discipline problem.
Maybe on if you mean by statistically, but it's just a statistic. I mean, no one said that inherently that's true because a person is black. They're just saying these are the statistics. The statistics are the statistics.
That's what the study says that you quoted in your report and said, that's why we now think they may not be motivated by race. Black children are just plain old more disruptive in the
Because apparently the study did some kind of investigation. I don't know how they actually were able to verify misbehavior as opposed to reprimand without doing some specific in-person investigations, interviews or something. But I mean, it's entirely believable. Maybe it depends on what state you're in, what city. But she's not challenging anything in the investigation. She's just challenging the idea that it could even be a possibility. She's saying, I reject that it could be a possibility, but she didn't reject any methodology in the study. She didn't say, oh, you didn't actually go to any of these schools and talk to the teachers that disciplined. And I don't know. I mean, how would you know the teachers are telling the truth? Or did you talk to any of the students? Were they in the classes? Is it true that no other students were misbehaving? Did you talk to any of the black students? Did they were behaving good? Did they confirm that this was true? That they, she didn't object to anything in the methodology. She's just saying, no, this has to be wrong.
In the classroom. How did you come to that conclusion?
Children should never, ever be discriminated against.
Well, I hope you take those
And
words
if
to
they
heart
are treated
and
differently
repeal
or
your
disciplined
citing
differently.
of this research.
Okay, that was pretty stupid. I mean, she's trying to paint Betsy as a racist because she refuses to be a racist. So, yeah, not very impressed with this racist congresswoman.